There's something I've been feeling for a while now, and maybe you felt it too. Back in the earlier days of One Piece, every Straw Hat felt close, not just in how they traveled together, but in how the story treated them. Each arc didn't just move the plot forward, it carved out space for the crew to grow. Whether it was Chopper's identity crisis on Drum Island, Usopp wrestling with his self-worth at Enies Lobby, or Robin's iconic I want to live moment, the emotional weight of the journey didn't come from the world, it came from them. They weren't just along for the ride, they were the ride itself. But somewhere along the way, that changed. Because post-Timeskip, the world of One Piece exploded in scale. The arcs got longer, the stakes got higher, and the cast became massive. Between new allies, bigger villains, returning legends, and layers of lore, the spotlight had to stretch thinner, and the ones who felt it the most were the Straw Hats themselves. Now, I'm not saying One Piece is worse, I'm not saying Oda's lost it. The writing is still clever, the world building is still unmatched, and the payoff to decades of setup is something only One Piece could deliver. But the way the story prioritizes its characters has shifted. Once the crew was the emotional core, now in many arcs they're part of the background noise, with only a few members holding the emotional thread while the rest play supporting roles. And it's worth asking, did the crew get too big to focus on? Did the story shift away from them on purpose? Or did the world just outgrow the boat? And today in this video, I'm gonna be discussing exactly that. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. In the early arcs of One Piece, the world was big, but the crew was still the story. Every new island didn't just bring new villains or lore, it brought out something personal in one or more of the Straw Hats. Oda didn't just add characters to the ship, he deepened them and you could feel it. Drum Island wasn't just a quirky winter adventure, it was the emotional reveal of Chopper's trauma, his struggle with identity and his quiet, heartbreaking desire to be accepted. Not just as a doctor, but as a person. Enies Lobby didn't just escalate the plot, it cracked open two of the most emotionally layered Straw Hats. Robin's I want to live moment is still one of the most powerful scenes in the entire series, not because of the stakes, but because of what it said about her journey. And Usopp's insecurities, his split from the crew, and his return as Sogeking weren't just jokes. They were real character arcs rooted in doubt, fear, and loyalty. Even Thriller Bark, a more comedic arc on the surface level, gave us Brook, a man with a smiling skull and a heartbreaking backstory. His connection to Laboon, his years of loneliness, and his quiet resilience didn't just make him lovable, they tied him into the themes of legacy, memory, and endurance. And here's the key, even when arcs weren't about specific Straw Hats, they still got moments, such as Zoro carrying Luffy's pain at Thriller Bark, Sanji's moral code in Skypiea, Chopper versus Geratsu, Frankie versus Nero, Usopp's perfect 10-ton hammer bluff. In one way or another, everyone mattered. The party felt tight but dynamic, no one felt lost, no one felt like a stat line, and the emotional through line was always clear, we're on this journey together. These arcs weren't just physical voyages, they were emotional ones as well. And the crew didn't just survive them, they grew from them. So how did this all happen? How did some of the Straw Hat crew members slowly become background characters? It didn't happen all at once. When the Straw Hats returned after the time skip, they looked cooler, stronger, more confident. They had new outfits, flashy power-ups, and a reunion that reminded us why we loved them. But slowly, arc by arc, something changed. They were still present, still on the ship, still fighting, but for more and more of them, the story started happening around them. Take Chopper for example. Pre-Timeskip, he was one of the most emotionally rich characters in the crew. His struggle with identity, is he a monster, a human, a doctor, or something else, was central to his journey. He had moral dilemmas, he had doubt, he had stakes. And post-Timeskip, he's more of a cute comic relief type of character. He gets the occasional monster point flex, but his dream to cure any disease barely gets mentioned anymore. Then let's look at Brook. Introduced in Thriller Bark with one of the most quietly tragic backstories in the series, he literally sang as his friends died around him. Brook had soul, literally and figuratively. And to be fair, Whole Cake Island gave him one of his best moments, standing toe-to-toe with Big Mom, smashing the portrait and earning a ton of respect from the fans. But outside of that arc, he's mostly being used for comedic timing, music jokes, and ghost gags. Frankie is also yet another member slowly being pushed to the background. He's still a powerhouse and he gets cool fights. But his personality, his conflict, his vulnerability we saw in Water 7, it's all slowly fading away. Now he's more like a walking weapons depot with one-liners. Even Nami and Robin, two of the most emotionally rich characters pre-Timeskip, often get sidelined. Robin went from her iconic I want to live moment to hear some Void Century exposition. Her dream is critical to the endgame, but in the meantime she's mostly quiet, mostly passive, and often absent until needed. Her fight against Black Maria in Wano was a breath of fresh air, but that's what it felt like, a moment, not a chapter of growth. Nami's also had a few great scenes, especially in Whole Cake Island and her bond with Zeus. But compared to how central and emotionally vulnerable she was pre-timeskip, it feels like there's a distance now. She's still part of the ride, but she's not steering the wheel emotionally anymore. Most of these characters still do things, they still fight, shout, and run around, but the emotional weight has faded. Their dreams feel paused and their arcs feel dormant. But the truth is, this change didn't come out of nowhere. One Piece didn't forget its characters, it just outgrew its old rhythm. Pre-timeskip arcs were relatively compact, even when they had political stakes. They were often built around one island, one conflict, and one or two Straw Hats whose pasts or goals intertwined with the events. That gave Oda space to slow down, zoom in, and give characters room to feel. But post-timeskip, the story doesn't zoom in anymore, it zooms out, way out. Take a look at the structure of arcs like Dressrosa, Whole Cake Island, or Wano. They're not just local adventures, they're full-blown revolutions, civil wars, and political upheavals. Each one introduces multiple factions, dozens of new characters, intersecting plots, and long-awaited payoffs to decade-old mysteries. It's thrilling, it's epic, but it's also crowded. And it's not just the Straw Hats in play anymore. You've got the supernovas like Law, Kid, and Killer, the Yonko like Big Mom, Kaido, and Blackbeard, the Revolutionary Army, CP0, the Marines, the Celestial Dragons, the World Government, the Gorosei, and it goes on and on. Every new chapter now isn't just about what the crew is doing, it's about how it fits into the chessboard of this entire planet. And in that kind of story, the emotional space gets tighter. This results in a natural prioritization. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji still get strong arcs because they're combat focused and central to the crew's leadership. They're easier to build spotlight moments around. Luffy in particular is now at the center of the world's attention. He's Joy Boy, he's the future pirate king. But the others, they become support roles. Essential, yes, but not always explored. They now get moments, but not full arcs. And the important thing to understand here is that this isn't lazy writing. It's a shift in priorities. One Piece post-timeskip isn't trying to do what it used to. It's no longer a story about 9 pirates on a boat having personal growth on every island. It's now a global epic and a political thriller. And it comes with a natural price of having less spotlight on some of the crew members. Also, to be fair, and we should be fair, Oda hasn't forgotten the Straw Hats completely. If you've been keeping up, you know that post-timeskip has still given us some standout scenes and fan-favorite fights. Like Robin vs. Black Maria that I mentioned before. It was absolutely iconic seeing Robin unleash new powers, both visually and emotionally. It reminded the world that Robin isn't just used for world history or exposition. She's still one of the strongest Straw Hats. Along with her, Nami had some great bonding moments with Zeus and standing her own ground in Wano. While Brook in Whole Cake Island was legendary, he infiltrated Big Mom's castle, copied the poneglyphs, and broke her treasured portrait. Then in Dressrosa we got some iconic Frankie moments in his battle against Senior Pink, or even Usopp having that God Usopp moment. So yeah, we shouldn't worry, One Piece still cares about the Straw Hats. They still get wins, they still get panels, they still get moments of personality and flair. But I guess the concern for most fans is that these moments aren't arcs. They're exciting, but they don't build, they don't change the character or deepen them over time. Robin had one big fight, but what's her arc since Enies Lobby? Frankie was one of my favorite characters pre-timeskip, but post-timeskip he just doesn't feel the same anymore. Chopper sometimes just feels like a cute gag character, and I'm still waiting for that one Usopp arc. These characters have room to grow, but the story no longer gives them space. They haven't disappeared, they're still present, but they're no longer central. Because the longer the journey goes, the more it starts to feel like the world is the main character now. The Void Centauri, the Will of D, Joy Boy, Emu, the Ancient Weapons, the Final Island. These are massive ideas, legendary stakes, centuries in the making. The narrative gravity has shifted, the story doesn't have the same time to sit with them anymore. There's too much going on. There's always a new battle to fight or more lore to explain. And in the chaos, the quieter stories start to get drowned out. And again, let's be clear, this doesn't make One Piece bad. It's still one of the most ambitious, creative, and tightly plotted long-running stories ever told. What Oda is doing on a macro scale is incredible. However, this new shift does change the experience for some fans. While some came to One Piece for the grand myth, others came for the small moments, the laughs on the ship, the inner battles. And when your favorite crew member disappears into the background for multiple arcs, which is basically multiple years in real world terms, it hits different. So yeah, in conclusion, One Piece did change, but that's okay. One Piece isn't the same story it was back in East Blue. It's bigger now, broader, bolder, a legend stretching across oceans and generations. This isn't about nitpicking chapters or blaming Oda, it's about recognizing that One Piece has evolved. And with that evolution, some of the soul has shifted. But here's the beautiful part, the emotional core that made One Piece special in the first place, it's still there. Maybe not in every arc, maybe not for every character, but it never truly went away. Every now and then you get a line, a look, a moment, and suddenly you remember why you boarded the ship. So yeah, the crew grew and the focus shrunk, but the soul of the story, it's still there, waiting for the right moment to remind us why we cared in the first place.